11 o'clock item right now, the special meeting. Member Soria.
Thank you, Council President. First, I also just want to extend my gratitude to you for providing me the opportunity to add this item to the agenda on a short notice. I'm going to keep my remarks very short. I believe that this item is very straightforward. I think that it's needed. And I'm bringing this item forward because I'm responding to a number of inquiries from community residents in my district and in the city, just concerning the impact of the visit we know Fresno is receiving by having Sheriff Arpaio come to the city of Fresno, and there's concerns regarding just public safety, response times, also with kind of what has been in the news on inquiries about comparing to some of the cost in other cities, like in Berkeley. I believe there was some news that showed that they expended over $800,000 in public safety services. So just wanting to make sure that as leaders, we also present to the public, an account and show them really how much additional dollars we're expending. One, to do what we're supposed to do, which is one, guarantee everyone's right to the First Amendment, but also ensure that our community is safe if they live in that neighborhood where the event is going to take place, or if they decide to participate in the event where the sheriff will be visiting, or as a protester. And we've heard this information that it is happening in terms of some protests. So I know that our chief of police and the department has been working very diligently to ensure that they have enough resources to respond and ensure that the community is safe, because I think that's the number one priority for us. And so what this resolution does, it just makes sure that within 10 days of events like this that are profiting, that the department and the administration would present to the public just how much dollars and resources we're expending to ensure that we're protecting the safety and also ensuring that people have the right to express their First Amendment rights. So very simple resolution. It does not discourage any free speech. It simply just ensures transparency and accountability for cost. I think one other thing that it does as well, I think that the information that is reported to us will help us develop policies and procedures that in the future could help us better deal with unanticipated expenses. I think that it's just fiscally responsible for us to know what types of resources it takes and how much money we're expending, because we know that these monies are general fund dollars. And so with the issues that the city faces, we know that our dollars are limited, and so we would just want to make sure that we're expending our taxpayer money the best possible way. And so with that, I'd encourage my colleagues to support the resolution, simply in the spirit of transparency and accountability of our taxpayer money. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. With that, we'll go out to the public. Are there any members of the public who wish to address this agenda item? If so, please come forward. Please give us your name and address for the record, and you'll have 2 minutes.
Hi, my name is Yerling. I'm from the Central Valley Equity Coalition. I'm here to talk to you about the transparency and accountability of the Taxpayer Money Act, knowing that this is your duty to be fiscally responsible and transparency over taxpayer finance. We think you'll be interested as well. This is very important to the people I represent, because when you host a private event, taxpayers shouldn't be responsible for footing on this bill. This is why I support this item, and we really hope that you do the right thing on behalf of the Fresno's taxpayer and support this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else who wishes to address this agenda item? Please come forward. Give us your name and address for the record, and you'll also have 2 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Venice Curry, 312 West Valencia, Fresno, California, 93706. I just rise in support of this resolution. I think that it is important for taxpayers to understand how their money is being spent and to make sure that it is something that taxpayers can support in terms of the potential division that it causes. I happen to have lived in Phoenix, and I'm not going to litigate whether or not this person should have been invited or not, but I can say that the concept of having invited him brings a lot of issues to the forefront, and it certainly does make the issue more charged, and the fact that our police are going to be protecting and making sure that no one is injured is important, but as taxpayers we should also have the amount of money that that's going to amount to. We should have accounting just as we would if we were doing something else, if it was some other organization or some other event. And so it's really about transparency and accountability, and I support the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to address this agenda item? If so, please come forward. Okay, seeing no one, we will close public comment and return to council. A couple of council members have already punched up. Member Bredefeld, followed by Member Chavez.
Councilmember Surya, did you make a motion? Because I don't. Okay, I want to talk to Police Chief Dyer before I decide whether I want to second it or not. Can I ask you a couple of questions, Chief? So I guess this is about determining what the cost for police would be if this for any private event, such as what's occurring with the event tomorrow. Have there been other events that have been private that the police have provided security in the past, or is this the first one that will there ever be? Or has there ever been one besides what's happening Friday?
When you talk about events, I can think of a number of events that we have worked throughout this year and in years past, whether they're demonstration, marches, protests. This year we've already been involved in about 60 of those events. Probably the most recent prior to this was the event or the gathering in the Tower District, where we had a like amount of personnel involved in that operation. That will be utilized tomorrow as well. So we have these frequently.
Yeah, so the thing I'm just wondering, I think Councilmember Surya is making a distinction with a private fundraising versus these kind of public demonstrations or protests. And that's what I was wondering, is that have there been, to your recollection, maybe not, any private events that the police have said, we need to provide services there?
Well, many of the events that occur in our city, bicycle runs, those types of events throughout our city, cross-city race, all of those events have the potential for them to make money. Now, the vast majority of them, as I understand it, are 501c3 nonprofit organizations. So they're not nonprofit organizations that host these events, but the reality is they are there to collect fees, to generate funds, and in many cases there is a profit.
Yeah, they make money.
Yes.
And those are a number of events that I think the police have provided services for.
A significant number throughout the course of the year. Folks don't really realize how many of these events that we're involved in throughout the course of the year. But the reality is we're involved on a weekly basis with these types of events. And it takes a significant number of resources to police them. For example, tomorrow night's event, we're going to have 75 to 80 officers that will be at that event, not including the Sheriff's Department, for about a 5-hour period. That's if everything goes well. And that does not include the setup time of the barricades and controlling egress and ingress points, as well as all the planning that goes in, the development of the operational plans. So there's an enormous amount of work. I would say tomorrow's event, in terms of policing, is going to be somewhere around $20,000, $25,000 with planning, setup, and the policing of that event.
Can I just insert myself really quick, because at least in my recollection, when we're talking about the biggest, I think the big distinction here with kind of what has, spurred the resolution was that in comparison to other events, I don't really see, them being fundraisers. There are a lot of nonprofits that may, and they have to pull permits. That's one of the things too, that they pull permits. The reality is that the event that we're talking about that kind of has, that is driving, the concerns from folks around the community that want to know this public information is that they are banking on, or they're making money out of this. This is a big fundraiser. In the past,
Right.
This has been a long-standing fundraiser that they have, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, it's my
And-
understanding,
and
yes.
Last year they had it. Did you guys have to provide this kind of?
This is the first time that we've been involved in terms of policing the exterior
Because
of an
of
event.
the controversial.
Because of the individual
controversial
that's
figure.
coming who
Yes.
is polarizing, yes.
Yeah, and so I think that's an important distinction that we need to make, and that the public does have the right to see that how many dollars you're talking about 80 officers, and not only officers but also city staff that's involved in the planning. And I will say that I'm so appreciative of all the work that you guys are doing,
Thank you.
because we don't want something bad to happen in our community as a result of how inciting this polarizing figure is.
Yeah.
And so I think that we should know.
Sure. Well, let me just add back, we talk about events. When Mr. Trump came to Fresno, that was for a fundraiser, and it happened to be at the Sullivan Arena. That event, the event we're having tomorrow, paled in comparison to the planning and so forth that we had yesterday. But the same held true when Hillary Clinton came to Fresno and Bernie Sanders came to Fresno. We also had to police those events as well, and those were political fundraisers, and there was no
Fundraisers.
cost on those.
There was no fundraiser for the Hillary or for the Bernie. There was no fundraisers on those. They came to speak. They actually came to speak at the high school, and
Those were fundraisers.
I think
But whether we want to say they weren't or there was an admission cost, those were fundraising events. And I think that's where we're going to get into the difficulty is which ones do we track? Which ones do we not track? Are we going to track these cases and then have the ACLU say you're only selective in the ones that you are tracking, which we've already been accused of? So my recommendation would be if we're going to track events that we police, let's track them all.
Okay.
And if may I jump in?
Yes.
And I'm glad you said that, Chief, because that's the administration's preference too. If we are going to go down this route, that we do track all political events, for-profit, nonprofit, and demonstrations, not just picking out the for-profit ones.
Okay, and so I think you made a very good point. I mean, you had to, with political figures that have come here, Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, I mean, to say, okay, it's not a formally private event, they're here drumming support, there's money being raised, they're meeting with people who are donors and contributors, to say that that's not happening is ridiculous. We all know that it is. You talked about the demonstrations, the protests. I recall the Black Lives Matter movement had come here. They marched out to Clovis. You had to somehow provide security, if I'm recalling correct, Chief, all the way to Clovis. We had Bruce Rudd, I think, running a bus himself to bring protesters back to Fresno. Is that correct?
Yes, we policed that event and blocked off streets all the way to Clovis. Yes, we did.
Okay. And so this is the Transparency and Accountability Act. Is this act necessary? Couldn't Councilmember Soria ask you, Chief Dyer, there was an event last night, or there's going to be an event tomorrow night. How much will it cost? Can you give me a memo that says how much it is?
It's easy to do if you want to know, and that is not any type of hidden cost. For every event that we do, for every policing operation of this nature, we put together what's called an operation plan that have all personnel on there. And if we want, we are also able to code those individuals so that we can have tracking of cost. So the answer is we're able to do that now. If anyone from the council wants those costs, I'd be more than happy to provide those.
And I want to add a couple things. So a lot of these folks that do demonstrations, or if they block the streets, we have a process and we have a permitting process. Correct me if I'm wrong. And so that's where you account when you're doing events and you have to close streets.
Well, we do have a permitting process, but it's very rare that individuals get a permit unless they plan on occupying the roadway. In fact, very few of them ever get a permit. The ones that do cross-city races and those types of organizations, they do obtain a permit, but the other ones do not. If they're only going to occupy a private property where they have permission, they're only going to occupy the sidewalks and march, and they're going to stop at all signal lights, they're not going to occupy the roadway, they do not need a permit. The parade permit kicks in when they start taking over the street.
Yeah, so, but for some of these, like other events, we do have a process and a permit process. There are those, obviously, some of the First Amendment events, like marches or the Women's March that took place
Yes.
on Blackstone.
Should they choose to.
Because they stay on the sidewalk, and that's
Yes.
allowable per our U.S. Constitution.
Yes.
All I'm
Could-
saying
could I
is,
get Can I get the floor back?
Yeah,
You can. That's okay. This Transparency and Accountability Act that's being brought forward, is that needed to get the information from you about whatever costs there are for policing, regardless if it's a private event, a political event, the Democrats run an event, the Republicans run, I mean, is that available to any council member? Is that not public information in a sense?
Well, since these are public dollars we're speaking of, the
Yeah. answer
answer is yes. People would not get access to our operational plans,
Right, of course not.
obviously. But in terms of total cost, you can get that
Anytime.
anytime.
We don't-
Any of you council members, and so can the media.
Okay, so they can just simply request it.
Yes.
Are you hiding these costs?
No.
Okay, so we don't need this Transparency and Accountability Act to be transparent and accountable. I know I asked you.
Well, I
would
don't
ha-
know whether the council needs it or doesn't need it. I can tell you that we are willing and able to provide all of those costs today upon request, if you choose to.
And so you are transparent and you are accountable already and have been all along,
Yes.
and will continue to be in the future.
Yes.
Okay, for that reason, I can't second your motion.
I'm not saying that there's no transparency and no accountability. All I'm saying is that I don't want to have to come every other Thursday having to ask for the numbers. So if there's a resolution presented, there is already an existing process in place, and that you guys know, okay, we have to account and we need to show it so that it's easily accessible for the public, rather than, on any given Thursday, I have to come and ask you, or the administration, can you provide me, a list of costs? I'd rather have something that we know that we have already a process. If it's not a problem, then let's just make the commitment right now that we're going to post it, or we're going to make it available, rather than me having to ask every other given Thursday. And I think that's what the resolution is about, making the information accessible.
The information, as Chief Dyer said, is accessible. The media can request it. If you have any concerns, Fresno B, Channel 30, any other stations, feel free to question Chief Dyer. He will provide it. He's transparent. He's accountable. The data is there.
Well, it's better transparency if it's up, if we have a policy. If we have a policy in place, that really, I think, equates transparency, that we are willing to work for and make sure that this is being done. I think that's a better policy, having it written and knowing that it's going to happen, rather than saying, oh, I'm going to ask for the information because it should be available. So a better policy, a true policy for transparency, is a written policy that says we are going to provide this information and we're going to be truly transparent.
Chief Dyer.
Well, if the mayor's office or council wants to give us that direction today, I will make it so for all events. And I can put it on our city website, department website, whatever you'd like. I honestly have absolutely no reason not to convey that information. In fact, I believe it even, in many cases, helps us as a department to identify those costs for all the events that we're involved in. I would not want to be selective and say which ones are for profit or not, because oftentimes we don't know. I just as soon collect it for all of the events that our special events unit polices and put it on a website. And if that's the direction that you so choose, say the word and I'll make it happen.
Police Chief Jerry Dyer, for me personally, I'm comfortable with the fact that this is all public information, that people can access it, the media can access it, any council member can request it. I think you've got enough things, and your police department has enough things to do with fighting crime. I don't feel you need to be responding to 60 or 100 things that you're dealing with all the time and then have to give a number because we're playing politics with Sheriff Arpaio coming to town. I just don't think so. So that's why I'm not going to support this.
It's your call.
All right. Thank you, Member Bredefeld. We have Member Chavez and Member Brandow. But I remind council that there has been no second, and I could call this thing dead for lack of a second right now.
This will be very brief.
But go ahead.
City Attorney, so we know that as a council we can request for that information. What about a member of the public? What would be the process that we have written down?
The member of the public could submit a Public Records Act request, but that would only be for existing documents. So this information would not necessarily be compiled as to a particular event, so there wouldn't be a document to produce.
But any council member can request that information and have it.
The charter says a council member can request information. To give direction, though, would require the consent of the city manager.
That's the administration piece.
Right.
And then the part that Chief Dyer mentioned, he's exactly right. How would the city define an event a political event?
Well, the resolution is not confined to political events. It's private events.
So private fundraising events, not political? Because I saw the word political in there.
That's used as an example, but it's not a limiting factor.
So under that example, what would have to be a party affiliation event, an initiative? What would that look like?
It could be a foot race. It could be a political event. It could be the fair, whatever it might be.
Okay.
I mean,
Got it.
it's not limited.
Thank you.
Member Brandow.
Just have one question. On that event tomorrow night, did the protesters pull a permit?
No.
So they may be, if they're blocking traffic or anything, that would be breaking the law.
Yes.
And that's part of what your officers will be there for?
A portion of it is certainly to make sure that there's a free flow of traffic on the streets, to make sure that there's no confrontation between the pro-Arpaio supporters and the anti-Arpaio supporters, and to ensure that everybody is safe.
Okay, thank you. I'm good, Council President.
At this time, is there a council member who wishes to second this item? Okay, item dies for lack of a second. Thank you.
Thank you for the discussion. I do still would like to ask the administration, just as a follow-up, since this information is public information, and I think that the chief has said that if, I guess he gets direction from the administration that we do disclose the information. I think that it's an important information for the public to know. It is, if we want to be truly transparent, I'd like to see you guys come back with an account of what was spent in this event. So that would be my request. Thank you.
Okay, so you're asking the administration for an accounting of this particular event's costs.
Because you guys are arguing that the information is available if I ask
So
for
you're
it.
asking
So
for it.
I'm asking
Okay.
for the information. I'm just giving you notice. So it is on the record and the media knows, and you guys have said that if I request it, they'll give it to me. So
They'll give it to
I
you.
hope that the commitment is there to disclose that information. So I will be requesting that information. So if you guys can present that back, Chief. Since the resolution will go forward today, if I could get that information in conjunction with working with administration of the cost of this event.
Are you going to request the information for the cost of providing security for the Women's March too, from earlier this year, or just this one?
Well, since we don't have a policy, I'll have to do it on a case-by-case basis since this event is happening.
But these people you don't agree with politically, so you want the information about their event, but you're not going to...
I will do it on a case-by-case because there's no policy now. I would have been open, as we had said, to have a policy that it would include all private events. But since you guys are not supportive of having the information accessible to the public, I will be asking it on a case-by-case basis. Thank you.
Okay. We'll move on to our next item. Thank you, staff.